Morning. We're going to get started. If everyone would like to take their seats. So good morning, everyone. My name is Julie Hennigan, and I'm the president of the Steely Group. And I'd like to welcome everyone on our behalf today. We're very excited to be able to present this topic. It seems to be a really hot topic these days, the future of performance reviews. So how many of you dislike giving the performance reviews or getting them? Right? So there you go. And how many of you walk away from these wondering if you even took the right amount of time, got the right results, had enough time to prepare for these? A lot of times there's not enough structure in an organization for these, and at the end of the day, we're wondering really just how effective they are. So today we'll talk about both sides of the debate, and we'll hear from some very progressive HR leaders and industry experts on the topic. Our goal today is that you'll leave here with new takeaways from this seminar. So let me make introductions here. On my left here, I have Lisa Pinion. Lisa is a human resources consultant and certified professional coach. She's a business leader with expertise in human resource management who effectively delivers creative solutions that drive engagement and create a positive bottom line impact. Lisa's been inspiring, coaching, teaching, and mentoring current and future leaders for more than 20 years now. As a certified professional coach, she partners with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their potential and professional potential, really. Her experience spans from coaching C-suite leaders to all levels of managers, small business owners, and individuals. Lisa consults with clients to solve their business problems and create processes and programs that are best in class. She leverages her passion for wellness and experience leading the human resources function for a nationally recognized best place to work to inspire greatness for her client organizations. So thanks for being with us today, Lisa.
Thank you.
To the left of Lisa is James Luna. James is currently a Talent HR Senior Project Manager in the Talent Strategy and Innovation Center of Excellence at Deloitte. He's responsible for leading, designing, implementing, and supporting a wide range of innovative and continuous improvement projects that are focused on delivering strategic outcomes aligned to Deloitte's talent strategy. James is currently partnering with various stakeholders to lead the implementation of Deloitte's new approach to performance management. Before this role, James served as a talent leader, advising and consulting with the business on the strategy and the execution of key talent priorities, such as coaching and career development, performance management, compensation, resource management, employee relations, recruiting, and onboarding. Overall, James has 14 years of HR and recruiting experience in the consulting and not-for-profit industries. So thanks for being here, James. To the left of James is Julie Wassmer. Julie is the System Director, Organizational Development and Learning at Edward-Elmhurst Health. With almost 15 years of experience, she has worked in audit, education, financial, and healthcare institutions. Julie is responsible for developing and managing strategic leadership development programs and has a strong background as a human resources business partner as well. One thing that Julie enjoys the most about her job is her ability to work with all the employees across the organization. She's also passionate about bringing fun into the workplace through various recognition programs and employee engagement activities. Julie is a certified professional in human resources, and she also has a master's degree in human resources management. So thanks for joining us today, Julie. And then to the left of Julie is Cindi Cervone. Cindi is a senior vice president for Challenger Grain Christmas. She's responsible for developing, delivering, and implementing a dynamic world-class organization dedicated to delivering outplacement consulting, training, support, and executive coaching. Cindi has successfully managed many large outplacement projects and national account programs. She is skilled in the training of networking techniques, interviewing techniques, and is especially passionate about assisting professionals with navigating their careers. Cindi also acts as a conduit between HR professionals and Challenger Grain Christmas, linking her firm to key executives across the country. She has created the Challenger Lisa, a listing of HR job openings in all areas of the country, which is seen by over 10,000 people on a weekly basis. So that's pretty impressive. Cindi started her career at Challenger as a client who had lost her job. So over the past 9 years, she has risen from an entry-level part-time professional to senior vice president. She was the youngest by 22 years and the second woman in Challenger history to reach Gold Circle, which is the company's top sales honor in North America.
I didn't know you were doing all this.
So, and even better, this year, Cindy's slated to be #1 in her company. So, good luck with that.
Thanks.
So, without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce Tracey Goldthwaite, who's Senior Vice President of the Steely Group. Tracey's been at the firm almost 2 years now, and she spearheads our human resources practice and our client service efforts. Tracey's been in the staffing industry for 23 years and in the HR talent acquisition space for the last 18. Tracey successfully started up a national practice in this space twice now, second being the Steely Group, and she's absolutely an industry leader amongst her peers. So we feel honored that Tracey represents the Steely Group, and she's ready to start a conversation for today. So Tracey, come on up.
It's always a little nerve-wracking coming up those stairs, right?
Going down's even worse.
Don't want to fall. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Julie, for the introductions. Thank you for joining us today as we discuss the future of performance reviews. We hope that you'll find the information here today not only insightful, but also even at times perhaps a little entertaining. Most importantly, though, we hope that at the conclusion of today's event, you'll be able to better determine what the future performance review should look like for your organization. Will you deliver the basics, or will you change the game? Either way, we've assembled a great panel of HR thought leaders to share their personal experiences with their performance management programs. Our panel represents viewpoints from small, medium, as well as large organizations. But before we begin the conversation, I'd like to start with an informal poll. For the benefit of our panelists, we would like to know where your companies stand in terms of performance evaluations. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand to identify which description best fits your organization. Your choices will be either A, has no current performance management program, B, has a current performance management program that's in desperate need of updating, or C, has a current management performance program that could be described as cutting edge because it emphasizes increased and regular feedback or uses the latest technology for capturing data. So, with that being said, can I have a show of hands for A, has no current performance management program? Oh, at least not that they're willing to say, right? Okay. All right, very good. That's wonderful. Good. Yeah, right, exactly. B, has a current performance management program that's in desperate need of an update. Yeah. Okay. That's what I thought we were going to see today. Okay. Lastly, C, do we have anyone in the audience who has a current performance management program that we could define as cutting edge? Ooh, nice. Maybe you guys should come on up here, right? We'll reach out to you. We'll reach out to you later in the conversation. Thanks, guys. Thanks for the poll. So simply Googling the term performance reviews will net you a number of articles on the subject. Many of those articles will highlight the surprising growing trend among especially large organizations who are completely revamping their performance review process. So what's driving the trend? Have managers' employees reached that breaking point? After all, conduct any informal poll, and it seems that most employees would rather walk barefoot on hot coals than live through another performance review. So, Cindi, I'd like to start with you this morning. As a senior leader with the nation's oldest and premier executive outplacement firm,
We can stop now. We can.
I love it. You have access to an incredibly large amount of employment-related data. And I understand you polled, I think, over 40 clients as you prepared for today's event, which was wonderful. Thank you for doing that. I was hoping you could start by sharing some of the statistics and the trends you learned from your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for having me. And it was fun. When Tracey asked me to do this, I did. I went out to a bunch of my customers and I said, you know, what are you doing in terms of performance reviews? I'm sitting on this panel and what's working, not working, what do you think? And I would say 4 to 5 times the response I would get is performance reviews. Ugh. And I thought, oh wow, well that's really interesting. In Challenger Gray and Christmas, I would say we're not a size of a Deloitte or anything of that nature, so we take a very simple approach to the process. But hearing what you guys are going through out in the market was really fascinating. And then when I started doing the real research, and these aren't just the people I polled, but rather national statistics. So I want to read some of these from my trusty note cards that my husband said I was a nerd for having. But they're fascinating. So 4 to 5 people are dissatisfied with the annual review. 90% of CEOs hate it. Hate was not the term I read, but after everything I read, I feel like that's the proper term to use. 90% of heads of HR hate it and believe accurate information is not available from it. 95% of all managers are dissatisfied. And even 70% of all companies hate it. I mean, it's kind of hilarious. And then from an employee standpoint, 30% of annual reviews end in decreased employee performance. 65% want more feedback, yet 98% will disengage from their job if they don't have feedback. And then from the flip side, 43% of highly engaged employees, if they're offered weekly constructive feedback, they're more likely to be engaged. So it's kind of funny when you look at these stats, you think, well, why do we still do this? But the truth is only 6% of the Fortune 500 has even abolished the performance review process, the annual one. So I'm interested to see what these guys have to say.
Very good. Well, there seems to be, as you really talk to people in the HR community, there seem to be, and not officially, of course, but 4 main factors that are driving this growing need for change. Some simply say it's too old. It's time for an update. The information is no longer relevant. It's not a useful tool. Others suggest that the pressures from unique employee generations, such as millennials, that they place on an organization for more and regular feedback is a factor. Another is the advances in technology. New applications and tools offer managers' employees not only more ways to monitor performance, but also the ability to monitor in real time. I kept seeing real-time feedback, constant feedback regularly as I was doing the research. Yet another is about workload, and I found this particular bit of information very interesting. According to the Corporate Executive Board, the average manager's responsibilities have nearly doubled in the past decade. So for a typical manager who had, say, 4 direct reports 10 years ago, today they have 7. And it is the belief that because of that increased workload, managers simply just don't have the time they once had to talk with, regularly work with their employees, offer feedback, offer coaching. So the interesting twist, though, is that while that may be the case and that feedback is declining, on the other hand, with the use of social media, and you go to your Facebook page and you get regular comments about a photo you posted, right? We've gotten into this environment where we're used to this constant feedback, right? Through social media, through being able to rate your experience at a hotel or a restaurant. It's like real-time feedback, right? Yet this tool has not kept up to date.
Right? Why can I know that my friend just had a baby 30 seconds ago, or a girlfriend got engaged, but I can't know that I maybe did something less than average 2 weeks ago?
Right. You've got to wait a year.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
So, James, I'm going to start this talking point with you. Sure. We're thrilled to have you on our panel today. Obviously, you come from Deloitte, which is one of the largest organizations that has received notable media coverage for its work in the area. And even better, not only are you an employee of Deloitte, but for the sake of our audience today, it's important that you know that James was actually part of the internal team at Deloitte that led the initial pilot for this transformation that Deloitte started. So a major undertaking when you consider there are, 66,000 employees in the U.S. alone, right? So I'd like to start with you. What can you tell us about the tipping point? A lot of people say, what was that moment where you took a step back, a company said, we've got to change this, right? What was the tipping point for Deloitte?
Sure, great question. Well, and good morning, everyone. Very excited to be here. I think these days all I do is talk about performance management, which is exciting because it's a topic that when I moved into the HR space is something that I've always had a lot of passion for. So to be part of an initiative like this has been an absolute thrill, even though there are some days where I want to just have lots and lots of wine. I don't know if there was a single tipping point. I think similar to some of the things that you kind of listed out, all of that kind of culminated both, I think, internally as well as externally. So a couple of things, I think, as we looked internally that kind of got us on this journey. One is we relooked at our talent strategy. And, you know, as an organization that's focused on engagement and high performance, we wanted to make sure that our talent strategy aligned with our business strategy. So one of our talent strategy at the time was where leaders thrive. So really focusing on a leadership culture, the well-being, and the development of our people. And so we had to look at our performance management process and said, does our performance management process align with our talent strategy? The second thing we did, and you kind of noted this as well, is we went and we talked to our stakeholders. We talked both to our people across various levels. So for the analysts, who we probably call millennials, to the more experienced hires within the organization, to our business leaders. And our people, I think the more junior level staff to the managers, they like the predictability of our current process, but you've said it already, they wanted more real-time feedback. This kind of twice a year delayed, past-looking feedback wasn't really working for them. They felt the process was heavily administrative. I'm going to spend hours doing my goals at the beginning of the year, but then at the end of the year, we don't look back at my goals or we don't talk about my goals. Filling out, tons and tons of information related to the performance management review process, again, that was backwards looking versus future focused. Our business leaders were, not very happy with kind of the data to make those employment-related decisions like compensation or separations. A lot of it, what we saw was the ratings were inflated. Because we are very nice people at Deloitte. We like to tell people to their face that you're doing a really good job, and then you're going to see your performance review, and we don't want to be mean to you, so we're going to inflate the ratings. That was a big other kind of factor for us too, is we need to make sure that we're having the right reliable data, and then as we are becoming a much more data-driven world, how can we also start looking at other kind of components of data to be more predictive as it relates to things like retention or engagement? The kind of third factor that we looked at was it basically takes about 2 million hours to run our performance management process. Now, the bulk of what we saw is that the majority of that time was spent debating a rating, talking about a rating, but was not focused on the development of our people. And so if we could somehow shift, not to say that it shouldn't take 2 million hours as it relates to performance management, because at Deloitte especially, our people are our product, right? And so we need to make sure we're spending enough time investing in their career. But instead, what we were doing was going back and forth on whether or not someone was a 3 rated or a 2 rated versus what opportunity should we be giving this individual? They are an experienced hire, and we know that we struggle sometimes with experienced hires within the organization. Do they have the right sponsorship? It was not the right conversations that we wanted to be having. And then lastly, we also kind of put ourselves under a microscope. Gallup did a study several years ago about what kind of predicts a high-performing team. And so we went into Deloitte and we looked at some of those factors as well. We did both a control group and a study group to find out what are some of those characteristics that would form kind of a high-performing team, since that's kind of how we operate at the organization. And we were able to kind of really identify 3 factors. One, that people felt that the quality of their coworkers' work was important, that there was a strong mission to the firm, and that they had an opportunity to use their strengths every day. And so we really looked very heavily internally. And then we also looked externally. We went out there to find out what was happening in the marketplace, looking at organizations like Adobe or Genentech, other organizations have been a little bit progressive in this particular space to find out what they had done and how that made that work. We sought, subject matter advisors. Marcus Buckingham, for example, does a lot of work around strengths, and kind of talked with him. And so it was really a combination of all of those factors that we really pulled together that says, we want a design that's a little bit more nimble. We want something that's more individualized, that's future-focused, that really offers that real-time feedback.
Okay, great.
A little art, a little science.
Yeah. And we're going to come back to all of our panelists as we continue the conversation today and talk about the next steps that they took, the technology, et cetera. But I'd love to move to you, Julie. You had a really interesting tipping point, I think, at Edward-Elmhurst. If you could share that with the group.
So most of you hopefully know that Edward Hospital and Elmhurst Memorial Hospital, we merged together back in July of 2013 to become Edward-Elmhurst Health. And, when organizations merge together, there's a lot of integration work that needs to happen. You're on two separate benefit platforms. You've got two separate, ways in which you do your budgets. You've got two separate, really everything. And so the first year that we were merged as an organization, we just simply told leaders, just continue doing what you always did. Edward, you do your Edward way, and Elmhurst, you do it the Elmhurst way. Well, through the integration, there were departments within the hospital, within the system, that were already merged as a system. And so then that created a lot of confusion for, we're a system, so what does the system do? And finally, we just said, really, we've got to make it one performance tool, and we've got to get employees focused on the same goals. So we set off on that journey to simply do that, and that was really our number one goal, is we've got to get everybody on the same tool. You want me to keep going now?
I know, right? It's an easy topic. Yes. You can keep going.
Right, I can keep going and going and
going. I think if we're going to talk about steps, then we'll come back. Yeah. Cindi, how about a Challenger Grain Christmas? Because here you are busy polling, right, everyone for us, but you live and breathe the same thing at your organization.
Yeah, for Challenger, it was driven by our business. So although we're a global firm, we're a pretty flat and lean firm as well. So I think it was, maybe it was 2 years ago, I think it was planned for November was our annual performance review time. But then we got a huge reduction in force that we had to take care of, right? It was all hands on deck. And then we got another one, and then we got another one. Well, we're going to put that off till December. Then we got another one, and then we're going to put it off to January. And it was just, we're just not going to do it, is what it kind of came to be for a short while. Well, that doesn't work, right? Especially in all organizations. But within Challenger, I can tell you that, our coaches are out there every day with folks that have lost their job. And that's not always an easy environment to be in, and they have to be strong for those people. So we need to, in return, recognize those people. So by not giving them a platform to give us feedback, and we give them feedback, and which just was not right. So we realized we had to figure out a much better way to implement technology, although I'll say we're not the best at that, but also just what does the conversation look like?
Right.
More often.
Exactly. And Lisa, how about you? I know that you went through this whole process at your last organization. Got lots to share about that. Yeah. What was the tipping point there for you?
So for me, in joining the organization, we had already been recognized as a best place to work. And the performance tool that I inherited did not align with my vision of the talent strategy, and certainly did not enhance a best place to work culture. So it was a very one-sided, one-dimensional tool where managers would have a very one-way feedback discussion with their employee and evaluate them on everything from their appearance to the cleanliness of their desk. So for me, it was kind of, okay, stop the presses. This has got to go. So there were no goals. There was no actual feedback. It was a once-a-year discussion, and people were rated, but not rated on things that actually drove their development or our business forward. So for me, it was a mission-critical initiative.
Can you imagine? You haven't kept a tidy space over there, so we're going to have to let you go today. Right?
Exactly. If you saw my desk, you'd know how much of a threat that is. Julie knows.
Yeah, right. Well, and certainly I would expect that in our audience today, we've got some individuals who are looking to create a new program, potentially for the first time in their career. What advice would you offer them on where to start, and what steps should they consider in creating or even updating a new performance review program? And Lisa, I'm going to start with you on that one.
So I think the most important thing always is to begin with the end in mind. So know what you're looking to achieve with the tool and what your desired end result is, because that will really help you very easily shape the tool and the process that you create. So if you're looking for a once a year tool, certainly build it. If you're looking for a more informal feedback tool where people are given that much more regular and timely feedback, it's an entirely different process. So understanding what you want to achieve, making sure it aligns with your talent strategy and also your business strategy, and that it's enhancing your culture instead of detracting from it.
How do you know the difference?
How do you know the difference?
Yeah.
Gosh. So I think you really have to understand your culture and your people and what's going to work for them. You can't, I couldn't take Deloitte's process and put it in my organization where we had 300 employees. It just wouldn't translate. So you need to understand your people, your business, and the values of your organization and what your current feedback culture is. Because I think without that, you're really on an upward hill.
Yeah, for sure. James, how about you? What steps would you recommend? I mean, yours was clearly so much more elaborate, but it'd be a great perspective.
Sure. I think very similar to Lisa. I think the first is the assessment. You got to understand what's going to be right for your organization. So I mentioned a lot of the work that we did internally to get us to the point where we knew that we wanted to present something to our executive leadership and say it's time to make a change. So really doing, I think, that due diligence is going to be important, as well as, piloting and testing. And sometimes that might seem weird, but in the face of the aspect of trying to be innovative, I think it's important to kind of test things out. And so we did a proof of concept test first with 3,000 employees. Then we did a pilot and testing with about 7,000 employees. And over the past 3 months, I've been helping roll this out for 40,000. So we haven't yet hit that 66 yet, because it is a process of continuous innovation. It's not implement and walk away. And so I think that aspect of figuring out that assessment piece is going to be really important. The second is change management. There was a running joke on the project where in order for us to get over that change curve, we said we're going to have 66,000 individual conversations.
Right.
Because, again, performance management is personal. It's individualized. And so everyone's going to act differently. And so you really need to make sure that you have a really established change champion network, especially coming from leadership that's out there, that's supportive, that's passionate about this. I think what we heard was, everyone wanted something different. They wanted a change. And so I think putting that type of program in place was really helpful. And then the last one is that leadership alignment, making sure that it really comes from the top down, starting with our CEO to the various different CEOs of our respective businesses. Really making sure that leadership is bought into this is going to be very important.
Out of curiosity, you both talked about the need for the assessment, right, to take a pulse on your culture. How much changed from when you first rolled it out in your initial, you didn't call it a pilot, you called it a
proof of concept.
Proof of concept. So how much changed from your proof of concept to your first pilot?
A lot of change.
Okay.
It was figuring out what was going to really kind of work for the organization,
okay.
How people were understanding the concepts, what resonated. And that also helped with kind of our change management approach as well. Okay. I think fundamentally the design components stayed relatively the same, but how we asked questions on each one of those design components, whether or not we were going to require certain documentation for certain things. And then the other big piece is we started off with just, small components when we still have the whole aspect of what kind of touches performance management. So things like low performance and high performance that we had to kind of figure out how we were going to kind of manage and work with.
Got it. And so when you do that assessment, one thing that I'm curious to have you share with the audience, how do you do that anonymously? How do you do that assessment so that you really get what you need to know?
For me, it was certainly encouraging that open and honest feedback and letting people know that we were creating a tool that really had to work for them. And so the more honest and constructive feedback they could give us about what was working and maybe what wasn't as effective was really, really critical. The other piece that is always a really effective change management tool for me is making sure that you've got your champions and your early adopters who are willing to kind of be your feet on the street and get your message out and collect some of that feedback maybe in a less intimidating way. I know it's going to come as a surprise to this room, but HR people aren't always super effective at getting honest feedback from their employees because people don't want to get in trouble. They don't want to say something that that might be damaging to their career, even though you genuinely, truly want their open and honest feedback. So, so having that kind of secret network of people who are, working for you to get the right feedback is effective too.
Very good. Julie, how about you? You had some interesting, you were in the middle of a merger where not everybody was integrated, not everyone knew kind of what was coming next, but you were going to create a performance management tool in the midst of all that.
Yeah, so I love what they both said about, starting with the end in mind and doing the assessment. So I first started talking to leaders across the organization. You have to remember when we first set off on this journey, we were just newly merged. So, there was still a lot of this, us versus them. And when I started talking to senior leaders across the organization about what their end in mind would be, I realized very quickly that everybody had a different end in mind. And so I had to form a group of cross-functional leaders across the organization, and I put them in a room together. My role, I felt, was to facilitate the outcome of this performance tool. So we talked a lot about the unique business needs, perhaps on both sides of the house. We talked a lot about clinical versus non-clinical. We have some leaders in our organization who have 2 direct reports, and then we have some who have to do, wait for it, 150 to 200 performance reviews per year. And so we had leaders in this room say, okay, you've got to represent your area. And really think about what's best for the organization as well as what's best for the unique needs of your teams. And we really needed to make sure that we were building flexibility into the form into the tool so that it worked for all levels across the organization. One thing that we were really trying to drive home was creating that connection of system goals so that everybody across the organization knew how they could impact the organization's strategy. So really totally complementing just what they said, it's an in mind and assessment.
Cindi, how about you?
I don't think I'm going to add much to what they've said already, but when I was out speaking with my HR customers, kind of things that they said that they had to have were, one of them was it needed to be able to change and move and be flexible. And even within Challenger, that's so important just because we have a lot of different demographics within our organization and different technology skill sets. And there are some guys in our organization that they don't write emails. They just pick up the phone and they call you. So, doing anything that way was not going to work. So I feel like knowing your population, which is the assessment portion, is really, and being honest about it, right? I mean, I think it's why technology is not working at Challengers because our population is not super technically savvy. They don't all look like me. So Actually, none of them do.
Are they tweeting, Cindi? Are they tweeting?
No, they're not really tweeting. Although I did teach a few at our last sales conference how to tweet. So you have to be really honest. So that's why technology is probably not where we're at today, but it's definitely something that we keep in mind for the future. And just figuring out who you are, I think, is the most important step.
Definitely.
And knowing that it's a bell-shaped curve and it's a journey. It's not a solution, right?
Exactly. Exactly. I think we're going to talk more about that, constant evolution. So I read an interesting quote by John Gerson. He's a former Google executive. And he said, companies should only use technology when it comes to performance reviews if its use is linked to some desired business outcome. Companies should take care to avoid falling into ratings for the sake of ratings traps, that sometimes businesses get really good at dramatically improving metrics that are meaningless and then are disappointed when the business does not improve. So what do you want to accomplish when revamping the process? And going back, you've all just mentioned the goals of the organization, the goals of the employee, but if you could all elaborate a little bit more on that, like how do you balance that, right? Because you need buy-in from the highest level in the organization. You need an understanding of what the business goals are, but then you have to balance that with the need of the employees, right? So how do you do that? James, I'll start with you on that one.
Sure. We've said it a few times already, which is I think the aspect of wanting real-time feedback is something that's prevalent in the world that we live in. You've talked a little bit about going on Facebook or Instagram and immediately having 300 likes. So I think the opportunity to make sure that we were providing that feedback to those individuals more real-time and consistent was something that was really important to us. And it's not additional work of the team leader or manager or supervisor to do that. It should be the work of a manager or a team leader to do that. They should know their employees and they should be setting the expectations. Because if you do that, then you're ultimately going to get better performance and more engagement from the individual. And some of the data that we collected on that says that. So I think for the employee, that was the most important piece. For our business leaders, it was the reliable data. We want to make sure that we have the right data as an organization of our size to make those employment-related decisions like compensation or promotion or separations. And so making sure that we were able to capture that in a simple way that wasn't going to be too burdensome for our managers. So to have a manager with 150 people fill out these performance reviews, that wasn't going to really work. Right. And so to have a simple way to do that, to capture that reliable data that we can then use not only to make those employment-related decisions, but we can tie it to other kind of engagement data that we're collecting as a firm to do some more predictive analytics work. And so I think for us, those were kind of the two key things that we wanted to make sure that we solved for.
Got it. Julie, in your case, too, I think you just completed, right, your first official?
Did.
Okay.
We did. So actually reviews are due on 10/31, so all managers are feverishly working on wrapping those up by Halloween. And so we actually just got the committee back together yesterday for the first time to say, so how did it go? James was talking about the spirit of continuous improvement, although I think you said it a little bit differently, but we don't want to just stop at looking at the first year and figure, well, we did that project, so now we can move on to something else. We know that there are enhancements that we have to make. We know that there are probably things that maybe didn't work as well as we intended, or maybe there's things that really surprised us in working well. But one thing that we did ask ourselves when we first set out and trying to find that balance is, so why is all of this important? You hear the statistics about how people basically loathe performance reviews. But why is it important? So from the manager, from the organization's perspective, it's about aligning to goals. It's about engagement and retention and all those things. But for the employees, for all of us, and I encourage the committee to think about this many times, what does the performance review mean to you as a person and as an employee? And really, we talk to our leaders, hopefully. I know I talk to my leader all the time. So my performance review really is what it's supposed to be, of just a summary of everything that we talked about. We really almost don't even need to have one because we've talked about it so many times. But that formal conversation, that point in time, once a year, twice a year, whatever it is, that's probably what you go home and talk to your families about. And that's a summary of everything that you've done, and it's sort of that celebration of everything that you've done each year. And so we kept that in mind so we could keep that balance of, so really, why is it important for the organization? Why is it important for the employee? We want to drive positive engagement and reduce turnover and all these things, and celebrate, and then have really good development conversations with employees who are the up-and-comers or high potential employees.
Okay. Lisa, do you have anything you'd like to add on that?
Just one piece. So one of the things that I built into our tool when I was designing it was kind of one of the accidental best components of the tool. And we certainly wanted to have the business goal alignment, so individual alignment with greater business goals. But there's so much that our people do throughout the year that goes unrecognized. And I created a special section for them to highlight their accomplishments from the given year. You know, what specifically it was, define it for me, what was your role in it, and what was the impact either on your team, the organization, one of our clients. And it became kind of their personal highlight reel of the year, and just a really cool recognition tool, because there's so much, you know, as managers, we want to believe that we have our finger on the pulse of everything our employees are doing, and we know how great they are or how not great they are. But we don't really know the impact of what's most important to them and what they are most proud of. And so I found that some of the most meaningful discussions didn't come from just whether or not their goals were achieved, but the other things that they did throughout the year that they felt were meaningful, either, you know, to their team, to their business, or to their own development.
Very good. So as I mentioned a few minutes ago, it suggested that the generational differences, right, are having a big impact on this need to update performance reviews. So Lisa, I'm going to throw this one right back at you. Do you agree that the millennial generation has had a really big impact on this process?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then, as a follow-up to that, I figured you would say yes. As a follow-up to that, how do you manage, then, a performance review program in an environment where you have multiple generations, where you know, it's got to be sort of a one-size-fits-all, or does it? Like, how do you manage that?
Well, that's why I'm here, Tracey.
Right.
I'm trying to learn from these guys. So I mean, if you think about the millennials, and I'm going to actually throw this back to Julie a little bit, because she taught me so much when we worked together 100 years ago, which would make her sound like she's not a millennial, but she's kind of that cusp. Right. So the millennial generation has, I mean, Cindi was joking about the Facebook and Twitter and things, but this generation has grown up with technology and texting and having, you know, instant access to social media. You know, I was never on, what was before Facebook? MySpace, thank you.
Oh,
I'm showing my age. But so this generation has had access to instantaneous feedback and through technology throughout their entire lives. They don't know anything different. You know, Gen Xers are so focused on making their bosses and their parents happy that we just want to know that we're doing the right thing by them. And the boomers and traditionalists are still really looking for that public recognition. So how do you tie public recognition in with an individual performance review tool? You know, we have to balance all of those needs for feedback, not just in the performance review process, but in a recognition program as well. And so I believe that the millennials have absolutely shaped what we're seeing in terms of that more real-time, instantaneous, you know, feedback either at the end of a project or at some other point that makes sense in the business. And we're also catering to the other generations in the more lengthy, you know, it's going to take me more than a week to complete this project, so I've got to build some different time constraints in there.
Got it. James, or Julie, we'll go to you.
You know, everything that Lisa said, I think one thing that we can do to help our leaders in the organization is simply understand the differences between the generational differences. I think many times people don't even really know what that means. What's a millennial? Who does that include? Gen X, Gen Y, and all that. So I think that's a good starting point, is just to simply raise awareness around that. We were actually just having a conversation yesterday about the millennials in our performance management conversation, because one of our leaders was like, I don't know what to tell them, because they want to know what's going on with their career, and the reality is we don't have that many upward mobility spots to go, and so you have to continue to sort of coach them and develop them, but let them know that it might not be tomorrow, or it might not be the next day. So you really got to find that healthy balance of keeping them engaged and growing in their career. But I think a lot of times the younger generations want it, and they want it now. And so you've got to figure out just simply how to keep them engaged so they don't perhaps hop ship if they are someone that you want to keep within the organization.
But I just want to clarify one thing, and I think that's an excellent point. And the millennials are getting a really bad rap for being that I want it now generation. But 20 years ago, it was Gen X that the boomers and the traditionalists were saying, kids these days, they want everything right away. So it's kind of the evolution of the generations. I think we get accustomed to wanting more and having more, and so every generation just continues to push the envelope. And I really appreciate and celebrate that about millennials, because they're challenging us to think of things differently and to be better and to do more to keep them happy. I think all of us benefit from what they're asking for. So it's just making sure that we continue to educate our leaders, who especially might be, from a different generation, that, hey, they're not being super demanding and they're not asking for things that are unreasonable. A lot of us are just afraid to ask for what we want the way that they are.
Cindi? I completely agree. And I coach a lot of right out of college kids. And I say to them, I'm like, if you can have a baby boomer work mentality, a baby boomer ambition and kind of dedication to work with a millennial mindset, I'm like, you are the most unstoppable employee that's going to walk this planet.
Yeah.
Right? And the truth is there's 80 million of them walking the United States right now, so we should probably pay attention. And they say by 2025, they're going to make up 75% of the workforce. So as much as it's, I think it's a very I think it's a good Pollyanna thing to think, these are your people, and we spend so much time of our job or life working, right? We should have meaningful work, and a company should have a responsibility to do that. And that's all grand, but the truth is that from a business standpoint, Challenger is saying by 2017, it's going to be the beginning of the bell-shaped curve where baby boomers are going to actually start retiring, right? And then there's going to be more jobs than there are people. And when that happens, and companies haven't looked at this information and haven't adjusted to what we're saying needs to be done, well, you're going to be SOL. Is that a good way to use that up on stage?
Yep. Why not?
I'm going to use it.
Video.
I'm going to use it.
Yeah.
But you really do. You're going to have to adjust to this. So, whether you're taking big ideas from these wonderful people, or, hey, I'm going to take the small idea and at least start the conversation, I think that's really important, because if you don't do it, you're going to start losing people at a massive rate, and that's going to cost your company a lot of money.
Yeah. So as the millennial representative in your organization,
I think I'm missing it by 2 months, but I'll take it.
All right. Okay. So what do you tell? Are you going to HR? Are they coming to you? What do you?
Yeah, and I have the added benefit that the head of HR for our company is my father. So, so that really helps. I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. And he says, you don't know what you're talking about. So we typically find a really good midpoint. But yeah, I think they are recognizing. But the truth of the matter is my company is not a ton of millennials. And the reason being is we're helping people during one of the hardest times in their lives, and we're dealing with quite a few professionals and above. Well, no one wants to be coached by a 30-year-old, right? I'm older than 30, but no one wants to be coached by that. So it's not as big of an impact in today's. But what we are finding is the more folks that we hire, say in my role, are a little bit more like me. And the people that we're selling to, it's not necessarily the CHR, or the CHR now is 40, and they don't want to talk to 65-year-old, George Hershey. They don't want to do that. So we're realizing we have to change our population, which is eventually going to push the technology issue on us. And we know it, we recognize it, but we can't can't deal with it. And I'm going to share one quick story that I asked a customer because I thought this was interesting. They said they had a performance review recently with a millennial, and they told him, he said it wasn't a bad review, it wasn't a good review, but he went in and he said he got a 3. He's like, well, a 3 to a millennial is like you just told them that they're the most awful, you know, person on the planet. And the individual, I'll state that it was a male, it was not a female, actually kind of started crying. And he said, well, there's no reason to be upset about this. You're doing a good job. And he said, but you said I need to improve on these things. Why didn't you tell me that 9 months ago? He's like, why did you wait? We've talked probably 1,000 times between then. So now you're insulting me at this point. And he said that was amazing feedback for them to receive, that they are used to receiving like this. So if you don't, they're insulted. If they're insulted, they're going to be disengaged or they're going to leave.
Sure.
Right.
It's kind of like that old, what was that old quote of Jack Welch's, right? If you ever walk into a room to fire someone and they don't know that they're being fired, that you've fallen down, you've failed as a manager, right? It's kind of the same concept. They should absolutely know where they stand. If they have to improve, they need to know.
Yeah.
Lisa?
I was just going to basically get to that same point, that's 9 months of missed opportunity in shaping someone's performance. And, you know, a lot of people in the absence of feedback, either positive or constructive, just kind of operate on the no news is good news and keep doing what they've always done. So if you want a different result, you need to be able to get that feedback.
Yeah. James, how about Deloitte? 66,000 employees.
Yeah.
Can you offer a breakdown of what the...
We've just stopped hiring millennials altogether.
Okay.
No. It's funny. I think as part of our research, you know, we're out there hiring the best students from the best campuses, right? And average GPA is like 3.6, and then they come their first year and kind of same thing. About 60% of them are told they're a 3, which is a great rating, and that's really deflating.
Yeah.
So I think our millennial generation made us kind of wake up and realize that we had to do something for performance management, right? They were kind of the loudest voice in the room because they are becoming the loudest voice. But I think generationally, it's all, everyone kind of wants the same thing, right? We have, as part of one of our design components, is what we call the check-in. So we ask our team leaders, managers, supervisors to at least frequently, once a week or bi-weekly, meet with their team member. Whether you're a millennial or whether you're a baby boomer, people want that feedback. They want to know, am I doing good work? Am I doing the right work? What kind of work should I be doing? And tell me how I can improve on that work. Everybody wants that.
Yep.
Everybody wants the process to be simple. They don't want to spend hours and hours of their time filling out administrative forms, things that aren't going to be looked at. They want it to be easy, kind of user-friendly, and hopefully have a technology to kind of support that. And then, again, to be individualized about them. Now, there are other components of the design, I think, that cater a little bit more to probably millennials, but again, I think that would really contribute to everyone. So we have a pretty robust, what we call career coaching, where aside from a team leader or supervisor, you have someone that we call a career coach that also spends time with you on your career planning. What are your goals, long-term and short-term goals? What are your strengths, and how can I help identify those strengths with you so that you can go use those strengths on the work that you do on a day-to-day basis? How can I help interpret performance feedback that you're getting from your team leaders to make sure that you're successful? And so is that going to vary, I think, in terms of a more junior level individual who's just coming out of college? They don't know yet exactly what they want to do, so they're going to probably be a little bit more invested in that process versus someone that's a little bit more senior who's set in their career, yes. And so I think what we've tried to do is have a consistency around some of those design elements that really, I think, are across the board, whether you're a millennial or you're a baby boomer or a traditionalist. And then there are probably some design components that probably cater a little bit more to probably the millennial generation.
Got it. Julie, how about you?
We, one of the things that we built into our new tool was less about numbers and more about the conversation. So what I mean by that is, at one of our campuses, performance reviews were previously rated very numbers driven. So it was 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You'd have all your different goals, and you'd get a 5 here and a 4 here and a 3 here, and then this would be 25% weighted, and this would be 50% weighted, and this would be 25% weighted. And so at the end of the day, get out your calculator and you are a 3.73. Well, we got rid of numbers and we moved to simply a words definition where that leader simply focuses on that conversation then. I think in many ways leaders were sort of hiding behind the number at times. And so, especially now for the younger generations who want that feedback, that forced them. Actually, one of the positives in our committee meeting yesterday is a lot of what we heard is people love the words and they loved to be able to have those real, robust conversations with their employees. So that's one thing that seemed to work really well for us.
Okay, very good. Well, we've talked a little bit. We keep mentioning the word technology, and we recognize that there's a theme of technology in this conversation. James, I'm going to start this one with you. What role did technology play in this process at Deloitte? And I think for everyone's benefit, maybe all of our panelists can speak to. There's different variations, right, of technology. So to what extent did you use it, and are you using it on an ongoing basis?
Sure. The million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Because I think we live in a world where there's so much technology, we think that technology is going to solve the problems. But we really took a step back and said, what do we want to get out of performance management? It's really a change in behavior. We want people to be talking more frequently with our employees. And so instead of allowing technology to drive the process, we want it to enable the process. And I think that's really, at least for Deloitte, something that was really important. And so we wanted to get out there and make sure people were, since this was a change, making this habitual, that they were having those frequent check-in conversations, and that was more important. And so when we started off our proof of concept testing, we actually started off with a survey. It was a really bad, clunky piece of technology that took a lot of manual effort to pull all of the data together. But it really was about, are people going to appreciate this thing that we call a check-in? Or are they going to do this simple self-assessment called a performance snapshot? And is that going to give us enough reliable data to make those employment-related decisions? We also focus a little bit on that team performance. I mentioned it earlier in terms of some of the studies that we did around high-performing teams. So we put in place what we call a pulse survey, which a team leader can use as a tool to understand the engagement and the dynamics of the team, but it's really about the conversation afterwards. And so all of that was initially done on this survey, and then from 3,000 people, we know that wasn't going to work, so then we went and built a SharePoint site for 7,000 people, and our technology team said, if 7,001 people join that site, it's going to crash. So keep it to 7,000. So we were, but it allowed us to be able to continue to move forward with our pilot and testing to really, again, understand if these design components were going to work. And what we learned along the way is we were understanding some of those technology requirements from our people as we collected feedback. Wouldn't it be great if the system could do this? Wouldn't it be great if the system could do that? I would really benefit if the system could do this. And so we started collecting all of that great feedback. And now we're at 40,000, and what we've done is we've developed a .NET application for the firm. So we've developed it. We're at the point now where we're going to start going out there and talking to vendors to understand, is there a solution out there? Now that we've gone through this, testing, where we've gathered a lot of these technology requirements, that's going to really help enable our success and really help enable the process versus drive it. I think, unfortunately, sometimes as HR professionals, because we're out there and we've seen the technology that's out there, whether it's performance management or whether it's a shared services system, they all don't necessarily talk to each other. You go out there and you get one solution for this, another solution, it just becomes a nightmare. And so I think we automatically think that technology is going to solve this, and it's not really about technology. It's really about a change in behavior and about the focus on that real-time feedback and using that technology eventually to help enable that some more. So still to be determined. Hopefully a year from now, if we want to come back and talk about it, we can discuss the end-state technology solution.
Same place, same time, right?
Same place, same time.
All right, very good. Julie, how about you? Because I know limitations in your environment. I mean, doctors, nurses, not sitting in front of a desktop, right?
Yeah, so I actually love what you just said. I'm sitting here making notes of some things that everybody on the panel here has said because I want to bring it back. But the technology, and that's kind of what I've been reminding people too, the performance tool, this thing that we're creating, it's just a tool. So in absence of that, focus on the conversation. In absence of a good technology, focus on the conversation. The tool's just going to help it, or the technology might just help it be a little bit better, but it's not going to make or break it at the end of the day. So yeah, we do have technology challenges. In fact, there are still some people in our organization that handwrite their reviews because they don't have access to their own workstation that has Word. So I see some heads nodding, so you can totally relate. So, you know, not every one of our 7,700 plus employees has their own dedicated workstation. You know, many of them are in clinical areas, they're on the floor. There's one station at the unit, secretary's, the unit secretary's desk that they can go in, pop in, and do their reviews. And so they have to do it at home or they print it out. So the tool we use, it's simply a Word document. Now our future is to get to a fully integrated talent management, platform. That's a couple of years down the road. But in the meantime, when we merged our two documents, we took one Word document and another Word document and then created a whole new Word document. But what we wanted to do was make it easier to understand, easier to use, more user-friendly. So we added things like drop-down tools and easy, type in text boxes that can spell check. And that's kind of a joke on the Edward campus is, oh my gosh, we've got the ability to spell check, because in the past we didn't. Yeah. And so that was embarrassing for leaders who, you take for granted how good of a typer you are, and if you don't see that red squiggly, you think you've done it, you've nailed it. So then you're in the review with the employee, and you're like, gosh, I just totally spelled that wrong. And so we thought, we've got to make the best of what we've got, and so we just spent a little bit of time with our IT folks, trying to beef it up as much as possible. We've learned, though, that people really enjoyed the spell checking, or people really enjoyed the drop-down tool. So we're going to further refine that as we go forward. One part of our organization has the ability to upload their completed documents to a portal, and those stay somewhere in a cloud somewhere. Our other side of the organization, and this is really the only difference that we have left, they still have to print those out and do a handwritten signature and then turn them into the HR department. So we embrace it, and we just try to make the best of what we can. We also, for the employees who don't have their own workstation, we did try to find a workaround where they could remote into a computer and have the ability to access their self-evaluation at any computer. So like I said, we made the best of our current situation, just tried to make it easy to use and easy to access for everybody.
Cindi, I've got to believe that like Sunday family dinner is going to be interesting, right? You and your dad arguing about like technology and
Not really. He's pretty tech savvy. I mean, I told you the story that my father is a man that when I was 16, he made me give a 2.5-hour presentation on why, or what the impact to his bottom line would be and what the ROI would be to get me a car. So this is a man that, I got the car, but this is a man that believes in metrics, and so I kind of push back a little bit. I do think it's about the conversation, 1,000%, but I do think technology is going to be a huge, huge piece in that. And I was joking with my husband before that I said if this was a drinking game, every time we said technology or constant feedback loops, everyone would be really drunk by the end of this, because it's just the way, it really is what it's about. So in my kind of exploration, I for this panel, I went out and I talked to a bunch of technology firms that is doing this. And just to tell you guys, there are some really cool tools out there that are maybe they don't work in a Deloitte environment. I don't know. I don't know if they work for 66,000 people, but for 2,000 people or 5,000 people, there's some really cool tools out there. And for my customers, the ones that are using them, they said it was about what they wanted to have come out of it was the ability to have that constant feedback loop, to recognize them. But what they didn't realize was going to come out of it was the amount of culture that was built, which is such a big thing these days. So, being able to see, hey, Bob, was recognized for doing this great work. Maybe I should do that great work. Or, you say hello to Bob, good job on the way in the hall. I mean, that actually is really invaluable information. So there are some really cool tools out there that have that constant feedback, and you can recognize. And so I've talked to some of them. If any of you are interested, let me know afterwards. But I do think you're going to have to use it.
Yeah. I think it's kind of the earlier piece around as part of the assessment that you do, right? Because there are technologies out there that are similar to kind of like a social network kind of platform, where it's a lot of interaction, and they're going to work for organizations where that works, right? But if you work for an organization where people are never going on to your own kind of Deloitte, or what we call Deloitte Net, or your own company website, and they're tired of emails, that might not be the solution for you. There might be another solution that's very focused on strength-based. If that's what you're really focusing on in your performance management tool, there's technology out there as well. I think it's the ability of how do you make it easy for your people to use. Things like creating, I think, the applications on your phone. I mean, that's something that's really important for us because of how mobile we are as an organization, to be able to sit in an airport and to easily do a performance management kind of assessment in 2 minutes is going to make our people very happy, right? Yeah, so it's kind of figuring out what are those things that are going to really be important to you from a technology perspective, and gathering that feedback to go then work with your solution out there.
And make it look like what we already are on our phones every day using technology, right? There's applications out there now that look kind of like Facebook. And they interact just like Facebook. So you don't have to teach someone a whole new, because, everyone's on, my mom's on Facebook. She knows how to work that. So if it looks and feels a little bit like that, then it's not a new technology that they have to learn. So I think it's important to not try to create this brand new magical thing, but, create something that don't reinvent the wheel.
Right. And again, to James's point, the technology enables the process. It's not a silver bullet.
Yeah. So I'm going to throw a follow-up question to that with regards to technology, right? Because I'm sure everyone in the audience is probably thinking, I may have a budget, right? I have to be sensitive to what my resources are in reevaluating our performance review program. So how do you make that argument, right? Because, well, let me start by throwing out a statistic that I read. I read an article that talked about an organization with an average of 10,000 employees. And they said that based on the time spent by their managers on the process, that it cost the organization with the technology $35 million a year to do the performance review process. So how do you factor that in to updating your performance review program? Where is it a benefit? Where does it become not a benefit? Like how do you weigh that, right? I'll start with you, James.
All right. Keep getting the hard questions.
You're making the eye contact.
Right, I know. Should have learned my lesson. So I mentioned earlier that when we did kind of that assessment, we saw that it took 2 million hours. And so a lot of that hours, again, were spent in what we call consensus meetings. So when we did our twice-a-year annual process, we took all of our managers, all of our senior managers, all of our PPDs out of the market for several days of these kind of healthy debates. And if you were to add up kind of the cost of what we lost in the during that time, it was probably pretty high.
Yeah.
And so again, it was looking at how can we shift that time to more of those immediate kind of check-in conversations that a manager is having either weekly or bi-weekly with our employees, providing that ongoing real-time feedback. And by doing that, what we saw with the data is the more frequently you check in with someone, the more engaged they're going to be, the higher performance we're going to get out of them. And so initially, it might cost some money, and you have to kind of be prepared to go in with your business case to say that. But the returns on the back end, if you make the right investment choices, are going to be much more beneficial because you're going to retain people, they're going to be much more engaged, they're going to get higher performance. And so it has to be a balance, but I think you have to look for where are you kind of spending money now that you could potentially shift. You need to have that investment in terms of technology and change, and then hopefully that investment you'll ultimately start, getting your return on with the aspect of retention, engagement, higher performance.
I think you go in with those numbers, right? Go into your organization and calculate those numbers for what it is for your organization. You go in there and say, if we don't invest $100,000, we're going to lose $700,000. I think every CEO is going to at least stop and listen to you.
Yeah.
And then the thing that I was always taught was come in with a solution, don't just come in with the problem, right? So here's the problem. Here's the data to support it, but here's also a solution. I've done an assessment. I've talked to some stakeholders. Do some of those first 3 steps that you guys laid out, and then go to them. I think it's a lot easier. I learned with my CEO, I don't go with the initial problem. I have to come, down the way once I've worked it out and I've planned it, and I get a lot better response from that.
Very good. Anybody else want to comment on cost? No? All right. Very good. So we've talked about, really what was the tipping point. We talked about then how do you match the goals of, updating your performance review program to the goals of the organization. We've talked about the steps that many of you have taken in getting that process started. There's 2 more components I'd like to address, one of which is training, and then we'll come back to creating that sort of change champion network within your organization. But let's start with training. Lisa, I'm going to start with you. If you do all of this work and invest in all of this, but you don't train the organization, you're not going to succeed, right? So what's the advice for training?
So I think training on the process is one thing. You certainly need to make sure that people are equipped to navigate the way that you want them to. But the most meaningful training initiatives for us, especially when I moved away from that very appearance-driven performance review process, I had to teach people how to have conversations, so how to give that feedback, but I also had to teach people how to receive feedback. So I did separate training sessions for managers and leaders, but also for employees, because for the first time, they were invited to give feedback to their manager on how their manager could be even more effective for them in helping them achieve their business and development goals. And that was a culture shift for our organization. And being a transparent communication organization and a company that prided itself on that, that was something that just wasn't naturally occurring. So I had to equip people on both sides to give and receive feedback and how to process that. And it's an ongoing thing. So if your performance review is once a year or twice a year formally, and you're not building in those opportunities for regular feedback, again, you're missing out on some pretty significant opportunity. So in order to capitalize on that, one of the things that we did to really drive that communication culture forward is we built feedback into our one-to-one agendas. So every employee and manager talked about effectiveness and what they could do more of and better on a monthly basis. We created a start, stop, continue feedback process where the employee at various points throughout the year gave their manager some pretty direct feedback on things that they should start doing, stop doing, and continue doing to increase their effectiveness for that individual. So we had to teach people how to get comfortable with that. And I think it's something that we all take for granted, but I think all of us have stressed the importance of having those conversations and being able to make them meaningful. So training on the soft skills is really a significant investment.
Did you find that those became vindictive at all? A little?
No. Again, because of the way that we set it up at the beginning. So there were some pretty tough messages that were delivered, but at the end of the day, it's about that continuous improvement and helping us all be better for each other. So not just for our organization, for our clients, but as peers and, manager-subordinate relationship. The end goal was to help make us better. And so I think that there were people who maybe wanted to use it that way, and they ended up quitting rather than giving their manager that feedback. And that was okay.
Right. Yeah. Good point.
The other T word that I'd like to take and make into 3 E's.
Okay.
Right? So I think it's all about first education, experience, and exposure.
Okay.
Right. So I think, again, this is a change for people. Even though most likely a lot of our managers, supervisors, team leaders, we're probably having conversations with their team members. It's first getting this kind of part of their habit. And so it's kind of educating them on what does great look like. Here's what a good check-in conversation looks like, and here are some tools that you can use. Here are some prompts that you can use to help facilitate those conversations. So first, really, our approach was really making sure that we had a good kind of education tied to that change management for both the team leaders and the team members. Then the next comes the exposure. So as I start making this habitual, I start learning what a good check-in looks like for me. I might go and have coffee for you for 15 minutes, and we're going to get things covered. You're going to know your expectations. I'll give you some performance feedback. All will be good. It might be another hour for another individual. And so you kind of have to learn and be exposed to that and really kind of practice it. And then I think the last piece is kind of that other piece of the training, the more formal training, which we're starting to look at, which is now that we have more team leaders providing more ongoing feedback, they need to learn how to do that and be able to manage that. And so we're looking at training around how to be an effective team leader. I mentioned the other role and kind of part of our design, which is the role of the coach. And so we want to also make sure that we have good career coaching, because before, that role was more of an evaluator. They were the ones that were kind of recommending the rating. So we kind of took that away, and what we've realized is not everyone's going to be a good coach. And so we need to make sure that we have the right coaches coaching. And so another big piece of the training that we're going to put in place is around how to be an effective coach. And then the last, I think, leg of that stool is our talent organization. And so we have actually invested a lot of time with our talent organization, people who are really enabling this process, that are really connecting with our employees, connecting with our business leaders, to make sure they feel like they have a good understanding of what the design is about. So we've been educating them, and actually after this session I'm going back down to our Chicago office to deliver an in-person training on how to be more effective with parts of our talent organization and working with the business to look at the health of the performance of their practice. So we've spent a lot of energy making sure that our talent organization also felt successful, and sometimes that goes a little missed, and I think it's another important piece of that.
For sure. Cindi, coaching is obviously a big part of your services at your organization.
Yeah, with ours, and I'll just make it quick, because I think with ours it's innate in what we do. So kind of that giving and receiving of feedback is just part of our process, right? We always tell our clients, we're going to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear, because we really want you to find a job, and we try to do that internally as well. So again, it's just part of our natural process.
Got it. And Julie, for you, coaching, what role did that play?
So, I really want to echo everything again that Lisa and James said, because I think training and change management was a big piece for us, and sort of that platform for moving into this whole arena of coaching. We are actually, you have to take it sort of baby steps at a time. And so in the first introductory year, we were looking at making sure that everybody fully understood the changes that were happening, making sure that people had their basic training of Performance Management 101. But that we also had to take it a step further and ensure that people were having these conversations that we wanted to have with, everybody in the organization, including those high-performing people that we really want to coach and develop. So where do you see yourself in a few years? What can we do to help you get there? And so we're continuing to now look into this next year is how do we further refine and dig a little bit deeper, creating new tools for leaders to help them with their coaching efforts.
Got it. So I think the last piece that we can chat about really is creating that champion network, right? Because we can do all of this work, but if you don't have support in the organization at all levels, it's going to fall flat. So how do you do that? How do you get that buy-in? How do you keep the buy-in present, right? So it's not just, this is a great idea and we're bought in, and then a month later it's, no longer important. Lisa, I'll start with you.
So I think Julie brought up a good point earlier in creating a group of cross-functional leaders who you bring in early as part of that process. I think those employees who are typically, the ones to volunteer and they're a little more progressive, getting them on board early as well. But then those people who are just naturally so resistant and dig in their heels every time you try to launch something new, getting them on board and having them be your champions, those feet on the street that get that message out to, and specifically giving them some very targeted messaging in terms of what you want people to hear about the change, what it's intended to drive, how it's going to make their lives better, because at the end of the day, we're all, what's in it for me? Those WIFMs are so important, so being able to make sure that people understand how this change is going to be better for them is key.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I echo everything Lisa said. I think too often when we look at rolling out some HR initiative like this, we immediately either go to the same people that we know who like talent and who are kind of friends of the family, or
right.
We volunteer people. And oftentimes those volunteer people are not very happy that they were volunteered. Yeah. And so for us, we went out there and we started at the top, really make sure that our executive leadership bought into this and kind of got their approval. And then from that, we went into the organization and really kind of put our tentacles out there, kind of similar. Who has a passion for performance management? Who recognizes that this is something that we need to solve for? Let's get them on board. Who are those people that were kind of, I don't know if this is going to work. I'm comfortable with how we've always done things, but having conversations with them to understand why they're resistant and looking for that aha moment. I know one of the conversations we had with someone, she was a very senior leader. She's out in the marketplace selling some of this stuff to our clients, and she was just really resistant. And it wasn't until we started talking about, it's not only about getting the best out of every person, but it's also about getting the best out of every team, and started showing her that we've not had the opportunity where we really focus on team performance. And at Deloitte, you're constantly in teams, and we need to make sure that we improve that team performance, because if we can get the best out of the person, that's going to help the team, blah, blah, blah. And that finally went off for her. And that was her aha moment. That was her light bulb. And then she became a champion, right? And I think trying to figure out and say, this is going to work for every single person, and that change curve is not going to be the case. So I think really spending time with those individuals, I think, is really important. And then collecting feedback. Every time we went through proof of concept to pilot to testing, we went out to our people and we had focus groups and we had surveys, and we kind of said, we heard you. And I think looking for those opportunities to say yes really allow them to have a good experience and start kind of spreading that within the organization as well. So don't forget also, yes, it's important to get that top line leadership support, but it's also that bottoms up that's really going to help drive this and make it successful.
Very good. Julie, how about you?
Yeah, so I talked early on about that cross-functional leadership team, as well as throughout the entire rollout process. I made myself available, and so did other HR business partners, to really spend one-on-one time with leaders who wanted to spend more time either simply understanding the new tool, or just wanted to have a little bit more conversation about how to deliver a meaningful review. And so my general observation there was people who, had a lot of questions or weren't really sure if they were going to become friends of the family. When you spend that one-on-one time with them and really walk them through, they often are able to overcome and say, oh, well, that wasn't maybe as bad as I thought, and oh, that's maybe easier than I thought. And so then they can help be a champion for you. So that worked well for us. And so, we just finished our first cycle, or we're almost finishing our first cycle. I'm going to a meeting actually on November 4th. So part of the reason for my meeting yesterday with the larger committee was to prepare for the meeting on the 4th, because like James said, I want to be able to say, we heard you. And we take that, seriously, and we will take all of this feedback into consideration. So here's what we know worked well, and here's what we think we're thinking about for enhancements or improvements. So to get them involved in two-way dialogue and making some of those decisions, so that by next year, when it's time again, they'll really have even more skin in the game.
Yeah, very good. I'd like to go back to, in the very beginning, we took a poll, and there were a small group of people who raised their hand who said they believed that they had a more progressive performance review program in place. Can they raise their hands again? Okay, I would love to invite any of you to stand up, and if you would be willing to share maybe one of the aspects that you put into your tool that you feel is different, that you don't typically see in other organizations. Dawn, I'm going to call on you. You knew it.
So I worked for Cervone Corporation, and in 2014, well, first let me say this. I'm part of talent acquisition and talent management.
Okay.
Designing and implementing it. And our former CHRO, he just left us this year and went to Patagonia, but he would go and speak across the organization about the things that we were doing. And we have our own Twitter called Pebble. I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing our CEO selling some of the things that we develop technology-wise in the marketplace. So first we developed Pebble, which is an internal Twitter, and it's a way for every corporate associate to reach anybody in the field. It's a live stream, you can join groups, you can get focused recognition. The more focused recognition you get little stars, so people can actually see like how much recognition you're getting. And then we integrated it with Signal Soundboard feedback. So we moved from the annual performance review process to quarterly. We set OKRs, objectives, key results, and keys and results. And so we do quarterly feedback sessions, and then we request feedback from our internal finance, our HR business partners, our own team members, and it's not you request feedback, and you receive feedback, and then you can go in and we still rate our OKRs, but they're not on a scale of 1 to 5. It's like 1 is your knocked out of park, but you look at what leaders are doing, what their OKRs are, and then you can write your own OKRs and try to figure out how are you going to help that with your drive the business. So it's pretty cool. It's really engaging, and it's a lot of conversation, not that normal metric. But what's hard about it is people that have been with the organization a really long time are so used to, I want the 9-box score. What's that person's 9-box score? Well, we don't do really 9-box scores that we actually tell people. They're doing it on the back end for HR to do their talent management and succession planning. But that's a cultural change, is trying to get them to understand, like, no, we're not going for 9-box scores anymore. What is the feedback? What are people saying about that? How much recognition are they getting?
Very good. Wonderful. Thank you. Anyone have a follow-up to that? I know there were some other hands raised. Don't be shy. Okay. All right. Excellent. So I think that we are ready to move to Q&A. So I would love to open it up to our audience. I want to thank you again, panel, for your fantastic discussion today. Thank you very much. And I see we have a hand raised already. Yes, please go ahead.
I have a question for Julie, and I apologize if you answered this already. I like how you switched to all words, got rid of the metrics, but I'm curious, number one, how do unions affect your position and your ratings? And number two, how do you rate when it comes to merit increases or bonus? How do the words, cross-reference any kind of merit?
So we're, Edward-Elmhurst non-union. We hope to always stay that way. I think part of our, philosophy for many years, for a long, long time, is all about having positive employee relations throughout the year, so that, is this, an organization where, management responds to my problems in a fair manner? Is this an organization that I can go and speak to my management or my supervisor about concerns that I have about my work organization. So that isn't so much a player for us right now. Actually, kind of our tagline for this year's performance review was one cycle, one message. So one of the differences that we had when we first set off on this journey was one organization actually had 2 timelines that they allowed leaders to complete the reviews. The other hospital had one timeline that they had their employees completing the reviews, and in many ways, the 2-cycle process was really for those leaders who had 150, 200 reviews to do, because they were basically spending their entire summer doing performance reviews, and in addition to the actual review, employees have to do self-reviews, and then we're also magnet designated, which is a nursing recognition, a nursing achievement recognition that we get, which also requires our nurses to get peer reviews, and so each nurse within the organization has to get at least 3, peer feedback forms. In some cases, leaders do 10. So if you say 10 peer feedback plus the self-evaluation and manual evaluation times 150, you can see why we would do that. So anyway, so one cycle, one message. We wanted to tie performance to merit, and so this is the first year where we're doing that as a system. And I think leaders are actually quite enjoying it, because they're able to sit down and have this conversation with them in a really positive way that directly can relate their performance that they had throughout the year to their merit review. That was a shift for part of the organization, and so the feedback actually that I heard yesterday was we thought it was going to be a lot more challenging than it actually ended up being. So I think that's a positive note. So
Is it completely discretionary then?
the merit.
Yeah.
So we've got a pool. It's a pool concept. So each leader gets their pool of money, and then they can spend that money how they want. So let's say the pool is an average of 3%. Some people might get 2%. Some might get 4%, and we ask them to take performance into consideration, but then also look at how long they've been in the role, internal equity, and things like that. But yes, that pool is up to that leader's discretion to use it how they want. The shift from one of the hospitals was it was a matrix based. So whatever your rating was, you automatically got X, whatever, and you got X. And they sort of had a forced ranking distribution before, so it was like they knew the pool. So it was a little bit different. So now we've got everybody driven to that pool, and we don't have a forced ranking, although we do educate on what a bell-shaped curve should be. Majority of your employees are that 3 and really mad if they're the millennials. But yeah, so
that was the question that a lot of my customers, or I asked them, I said, well, how do you tie it to your merit increases? And if you take away this, and a lot of what I heard was that it's almost used as a crutch, because the truth of the matter is that rating system was a discretionary opinion anyways, right? So, but then if anything, I feel like the way you guys are describing doing it with having more conversations and the constant feedback loop is, your people better than. Right. One of my customers said yesterday on the phone, he said, who your good people are. You know who your best people are. You don't need a rating system to tell you that. I can tell you who the best person on my team is. So I think it's just kind of being brave about it, right? And just being like, we're going to get rid of this, because if we're going to be discretionary, let's be discretionary and know our people really, really well.
Well, and then it forces you to have to really sit down, think about, be prepared, and have those conversations with, with people.
And I'll comment a little bit on Deloitte. So, because we operate in a variety of different teams, so your team leader for 6 months might be a different team leader, the next 6 months. And so when we looked at getting rid of kind of ratings in the force-based ranking, we put in place what we call a performance snapshot, which I've kind of mentioned a few times. And it's a 5-question assessment of the individual's, not skills, because we have a lot of science on the fact that people rate skills differently. What I think about someone's performance management is going to be very different on what Lisa thinks about performance management. So there was a lot of science behind the questions that we asked, making sure that we would see differentiation, that we would see range, and that ultimately showed and asked an individual what their future actions would be, not so much what they think of themselves, right? And so we deploy that to our team leaders, and we take the first question and the second question, and we average and weight that. And we ask individuals to at least have 4 of those performance snapshots a year. Some employees might have 20 based off of the project that they're on and the number of hours. And we use that as one of the data points when we look at compensation, along with other factors like someone's metrics. And so if you're a more senior person, you're going to be out there selling to the organization. We're going to want to know what your sales and your managed revenue looks like. And so it's one of the starting points or data points when we look to employment kind of decisions like compensation. So that's that reliable data that I was talking about. In some organizations, again, going back to that assessment, if you're a very kind of, this is my team leader, this is the individual that I'm going to have the entire year, they probably are going to be able to pay you without having to have any data available. They can easily do that because they've seen your performance throughout the entire year. But other organizations, you might have to look a little bit different in terms of what's going to be that reliable data that we're going to need to capture in order to make those employment-related decisions like compensation.
Very good. Yes, sir.
Hands.
Bill Dwyer from Aspire. Thank you all for your input. It's been great. How do you look at different levels of employees, and is it the same evaluation? Do you try to do different ones, the ratings, things like that?
I could hop in what we did. So we have a staff evaluation form, and then we've got a leadership tool. Really the biggest difference outside of your own individual goals or job duties in some cases. The biggest difference for Edward-Elmhurst on those is looking at employee what are the driven values. Driven is what the acronym is for our values. So looking at the employee values for employees. And so the manager tool, what we are rating managers on is looking at leadership competencies. And so part of our journey too was creating a standard set of values for the organization, creating a revamped standard set of competencies for our leaders. And so that's our biggest differentiation for us. As far as the system, like goals, I talked earlier about having system goals that we can cascade throughout the organization. Now, of course, I think at higher levels you might have more impact, like finances as an example. I might have a department budget. I might, manage, $1 million worth of money in the organization, but everybody's got impact to the bottom line. So, from a regular old employee's perspective, how are they managing their overtime? Are they being mindful of managing their supplies and inventory? And so we wanted to keep it consistent from that perspective because we wanted to make sure that everybody saw the impact that they had in the organization. So we really just kind of looked at the leadership, what do we expect of a leader versus what do we expect of the everyday employee in terms of their values.
Very good. Yes.
My name is Paula Kosen, and as we move, as the forerunners of moving from performance evaluation to more performance development, my interest, of course, is career development. And so when I managed a program at a former employer, we had career workshops that were career planning for employees because we can't assume that even professional employees know what they take. And to have a career discussion, not a performance discussion with a manager. And managers, of course, as you said, need to learn how to coach. So I'm curious to know,
the revamping of the performance process is one piece, but then when you have employees, particularly millennials, asking for more guidance on how they can guide their careers, what are the infrastructure things that you're either in place or thinking about that supports that career development piece so that the employees can be more self-directed in that?
I mean, again, I think the thing about performance management is it really does take a large network because it does touch everything. And so we've been working very closely with our learning and development organization to make sure that as we roll out performance management, as they look at their training programs, their leadership programs, that it's bringing in components of performance management. So we talk a lot about making sure people are providing that real-time feedback. I mentioned earlier that we are moving to more of what we call a strength-based organization, and not strengths in the way that you've been told by a manager, this is what you're really good at, and lists all the 5 things. You as an individual know what your strengths are, and so it's capitalizing on those strengths. And you might not necessarily be good at them, but it's giving the opportunities to be able to work on those, because what we know is if an individual has an opportunity to use their strengths, they're going to, again, be more engaged, higher performance. So it's bringing in that strength-based learning also into our various learning platforms. And then the next big piece for us is what I mentioned earlier, which is we have everyone a career coach within the organization. So putting some more focus and attention on making really good coaches, to focus on career planning, to focus on that individual and making sure that they know what their strengths are. And then the other piece is interpreting that performance feedback. So I think we still have a little ways to go, especially in that particular model, to make a shift. But definitely working closely with learning and development to bring that into our learning and development programs.
And I think everyone understanding what the career options are for people, so especially if the organization hasn't taken time to formalize their career paths or career mapping philosophy in terms of whether it's a ladder or a lattice, and how to gain some of that additional exposure, that spending some time in that area is critical. And then getting people to understand, especially the millennials, that advancement doesn't always mean an increased title, that as you acquire new skills, it develops your business acumen, it develops your technology ability, and all of that increases your marketability internally and externally. And so focusing more on not just the title or the position, but what the skills they need to acquire are.
Debbie, you have a question?
Hi, my name is Debbie Ravish. I'm with Patina Solutions. How have you used assessment tools, inventories, folding them into the performance process, if you have it all?
So we're right now looking at the aspect of competencies, right? So we've had established competencies within the organization, and we're taking a second look at those because it's something that I think a couple of years ago was really hot in the marketplace. And I think to what Julie said, I think every organization should have a set of competencies that they hold all of their organization to. But I think prior we were evaluating people against those competencies, and we need to kind of take a different look. And so that's part of kind of the next evolution for us, is how do we work that in, especially in an organization like Deloitte, where we also depend a lot on heavy technical competencies. You need to know how to do tax work to be in our tax practice. You need to be a good auditor and have quality to be able to work in our audit function. So for us, it's kind of making sure we bring those into play, while at the same time trying to move towards more of that strength-based organization. So I think more to come there, but it's definitely something that we're looking into, but moving away from evaluating against those competencies. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
A lot of the managers tend to evaluate independently rather than using that as a metric to evaluate their employees from a more objective measurement tool. And so that's where my interest lies in using those measurement tools to find out where they've been, where they are, how to measure those.
Yes.
Hi, Latanya Wilkins, JLL. I had a quick question. So Can you talk a little bit more about the technology? And the reason why I want to know is we recently rolled out Wassmer. And it's nice. I mean, some people use it, some don't. But I think I like it because it's real time. And we've got like our Wassmer adopters, and then we have our non-adopters. So that's the first question. And in the technology, is there an easy way to participate? Like, are there likes in there? Is there an easy way to provide quick comments? Because when I think about it, I know we're looking at some things to do now, and when I talk to someone from GE, I mean, they're using that, but it's simple, and it's button-based. So can you tell us a little bit about like what you guys are doing, especially Deloitte, I'd love to know, and then everybody else.
I can talk about what I've seen in the market.
Go for it.
We don't use it. I wish we did, but I know your organization pretty well, so yeah, I know you guys. I can be pretty specific to you guys. Yeah, the answer is yes. There are tools out there that, like I said, look a little bit like Facebook, where you can see that, you know, Bob's manager gave him a badge, or, you know, gave him some recognition in the feed. And this can be a feed for the company, or this could be a feed within your department. You can like it, you can comment on it. Way to go, Bob. You know, there is technology out there that does it, that makes it just like we do every day with our friends and family, right? And it really, I think it works. I think it works within the right organizations. And I think with any organization or anything in life, right, it's a bell-shaped curve. You're going to have most that will do it, and some will and some won't. But there's great technology out there that makes it very, very simple.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's figuring out what's the right technology, right? Like, I'm a one social media kind of person. Like, I can only handle one. Where a lot of other people, they're cool with Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and Pinterest and you name it, and the next one's that's coming out next week. And so a lot of other people are similar, right? And so we have to figure out what's going to work with our organization. And that's kind of why I think we really took a step back and said, let us really get that behavior right first. Let us make sure that we implement this in a way that people are actually going to do this design because it's different, and then let's learn from them with the technologies that we've kind of built to be able to just kind of bare bones support that, to understand what else they would like to see, and so that we could gather those technology requirements so that when we go to sit down with these vendors, we can say, this is what our requirements are. Can you build us that solution? Because there are some that are out there that is out of the box. This is what you get. And if you want to change anything, it's going to cost you money to do it. There are some where it's going to fit within your organization, and then there are others where there's going to be a lot of customization. So I think it's really dependent on your business. But for us, we started off with, what's the bare bones technology that we need to enable this, and let's get that behavior right first, and then let's go find that technology solution that's going to be awesome and amazing, that's going to make this even more better.
And we can talk offline, too, about things that I found.
Okay. Jen.
I have a question. I'm Jen Craze. I'm the head of Global Talent Acquisition from Getting Over. So this is a TA question. Have any of your organizations beyond HR and TA professionals incorporated goals or performance focus around attracting talent into the organization? Not just attracting, but maybe diversity or anything like that. I'd love to hear about that.
So for us, not so much diversity specific, but we built a manager scorecard into our evaluation process. So it was a different process for managers and leaders than it was for employees. And we really wanted to make sure that they were following our institutionalized best practices. So our hiring best practices, our performance best practices. We found that a lot of our managers were kind of going rogue and doing their own thing. And when they did that, it impacted our quality of hire, it impacted our engagement scores, and it impacted our retention for sure. So when they followed the established rules and listened to the training and actively participated in the processes that drove our culture forward, then we realized a really positive result for that. So we built a scorecard that factored in whether or not they followed our best practices, the engagement scores of their staff, the retention of their staff, and it wasn't, no single component was weighted more heavily than any other, but it was, as much those pieces as it was driving the business results.
Very good. Yes, Patty.
you know that there's two primary objectives, or big objectives of this whole process. One is, how do we make it less time to managers? We don't want to take them away from their job. And then on the flip side, how do we have better conversations and more meaningful conversations and really spend the right amount of time with employees so that they're getting helpful feedback? And I'm just curious about how you balance that, because I've been involved in situations where we ask managers to have more conversations, and so therefore they write out more about what they're going to say. That goes into the review. That takes more time. I'm just curious about how you manage that balance.
Sure. I can take a first pass at it. I mean, I think the balance is always going to be challenging, right? And as I mentioned earlier, our managers shouldn't see this as additional work. They should see it as the work of a manager. And so by having more frequent conversations, and through what the vehicle we use, what we call a check-in, the focus should be primarily on the work. It should be short-term. You are working towards a milestone or towards a work product, and how are you working towards that? So the majority of that conversation should really focus on the work and making sure that the individual knows what's expected of them. And if our managers are able to do that, then they're going to get higher performance out of the individual. I think the second piece then comes in the performance and really getting to know the person. So making sure that they're providing that performance feedback. They know in our world the strengths of that individual. So if something comes their way and they know that I'm really strengthened by change management, or that I'm really strengthened by data analytics, and a project comes my way, if I give that project to myself, I'm going to probably get a better work product out of that individual. So it's about knowing the individual, and it's about setting those expectations. But at the end of the day, that should be the work of a manager.
And I think, too, just to build on that, empowering the employee to have them lead their own discussion. In our organization, it was very much an employee-driven conversation. So the employees own the monthly one-to-one or bi-weekly, however often they're meeting. It's the employee setting the agenda. So the manager certainly has components that they want to make sure are documented and discussed, but the employee is the one who drives that. And when you create a culture where the employee is driving their own feedback process, it takes much of the burden off the manager.
Absolutely.
I think we've got time for one more question. Yes, sir.
I'm Paul Victoria from the Museum of Science and Industry. In regards to transparency, a lot of you are kind of getting rid of ratings and not having ratings on these check-ins and performance snapshots. So what is the feedback from employees in regards to, they know this information is being used for talent or merit, things like that. So what kind of feedback are you getting about transparency?
Sure. I think when we were out there talking, when we first rolled this out, there was kind of 3 questions that we got. How am I going to get paid? How do I know where I stand? And the other one was technology, so drink.
See? Should have made this an afternoon event. Next time.
The performance snapshot that we fill out to be able to get that reliable data, it's not shared with the individual. And again, I kind of mentioned it earlier, because when we had historically shared that information, everyone got a 2 rated, right? It was completely inflated. And so we wanted to keep that kind of anonymous, because we felt that would allow us that reliable data, again, to make those employment-related decisions. But we got a lot of pushback from our people, because we live in a world where everything is very transparent. If I want to go to a dinner restaurant and I want to look up dinner, I look to see Yelp. And if anything's below 4 stars, I'm not going to go there. You rate your Uber driver. That aspect of information and available information is just really prevalent in this world. And so it really kind of was uncomfortable for our people. And so we took that feedback and we said, okay, let's do a transparency test. So the group that we had piloted this past year, about 2,000 people within our tax practice, we took all of their performance snapshots and we showed them their dot on the scatter plot. And we said, this is your dot of your performance from your project. This was one of the factors that went into the decisions related to compensation. And then we got feedback from our leaders who presented that, and we got feedback from the people. And so we're now in the process where we're trying to finalize what is that right level of transparency. Will we continue to show someone their scatter plot and where they sit within that scatter plot as it relates to their project performance? Is that really an accurate view of their performance, or do we need to build in all of the other metrics that we consider within our organization? Is that something we do quarterly? Is that something we do yearly? It's something that we're still figuring out, but it definitely is a very hot topic that I think, again, you have to look at your organization and say, how transparent are you now? How transparent do you want to be, and what's kind of important?
Are you going to let us all know?
Yes, a year from now we'll come back, we'll
Okay.
talk about technology, we'll talk about transparency.
And you'll bring the wine,
T.
right?
The other tea.
I think we have our topic for next year this time. So that will conclude our Q&A session. I think certainly that our speakers might be willing to stick around for a few more minutes. So if you have a few questions at the end of our announcements, I invite you to come on up. Again, I just want to thank you so much for your participation. You guys were fantastic. Thank you for all of your expertise that you brought today. Okay, speaking of announcements, I would just like to ask all of the Steely Group employees that are in the room to please stand for just a moment. I think you're all sort of scattered about. There we go. Wonderful. We recognize a lot of faces in the crowd today, and we just want to thank all of the folks that we know as clients for being here today and for your participation. For those of you who are not familiar with the Steely Group, we are a staffing and recruiting organization. We specialize in the placement of healthcare, clinical, and human resource professionals. So certainly if you're interested in learning more about us and our organization, I invite you to introduce yourself to any one of the Steely Group members that you see here today. So thank you for that. We have just a few thank yous here. I want to start with Denise Kowalski. Denise, if you'd be so kind as to stand up in the back of the room. Denise is our Director of Marketing, and she works tirelessly in putting these events together for us. So much work goes into them. We just want to recognize you, Denise, for everything. Thank you so much. Now, we always have fun at our Steely Group seminar. So with that, we have a giveaway today that Denise is going to bring up to me. We were given a lovely soft-sided briefcase by Added Incentives, and we have filled it with a bunch of our promotional items and some other fun goodies.
I'm not tackling those here.
Okay. And Denise, did you pull the name for me? Okay. We pulled a name at random. Sally Madden from the Academy of General Dentistry. You're our winner. There you go. You're welcome. Enjoy. Feedback sheet. Indeed, your feedback is so important to us. It's exactly what we rely upon to determine the topics for our upcoming seminars. Our next one will be in January. We had so much great feedback in putting this one together. We really invite you to leave your ideas for topics on the feedback sheet, and certainly give us your feedback. It really helps us in the planning of our next event. HRCI recertification credits, just a reminder, today's seminar has been approved for 2 HR General recertification credit hours through the HR Certification Institute. So if you'd like to get a certificate, please feel free to see Denise at the back of the room. She's raising her hand. Additionally, today our seminar has been videotaped, and it will be available online on our website and our YouTube channel for on-demand and viewing probably by the end of this week. So we invite you to come back and take a look. And then lastly, our next seminar, folks, will indeed take place in January, Tuesday, January 26th, right here again at the Hyatt Lodge. Please check our website and our LinkedIn page for additional details, and we hope to see you all back here again. Thank you so much, everybody.